On today's show, we're kicking off a new series on the 7 essential strategies for successful investing in retirement. First, we'll set the stage on how retirement has changed and why the coming great wealth transfer, makes this such a critical time for women to feel confident and educated about managing wealth. Welcome to another episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast, where we want to empower and educate women to live your retirement on your terms. I'm your host, Derek Blake, practicing retirement planner with over 25 years of experience, founder of Blake Wealth Management, and I would not be the man I am today without the women in my life. This is the first episode in our series on the 7 essential strategies for successful investing in retirement. Over the next few episodes, we'll walk through 2 more strategies per episode, why they matter, and more importantly, how you can apply them to your own retirement. Joining me once again to unpack all this is Wendy McConnell. Wendy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. As we talked about before we started the episode, I have my daughter and granddaughter in town for my wife's birthday, which is very special. So we're excited. We got a lot of good stuff planned, and
All right.
always great to have the family in the house.
Lots of family and making memories and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. And our grandbaby saying, she says words now that it's like, where did that come from? So we're at that stage of how does she even know how to say that?
So watch your language. Eric.
Yes, very much. Actually, I was watching the Cowboy game Sunday, and I let one slip, which is not unusual with Cowboy games.
That's a very good game, I got to say. I watched that too.
It was exciting, but good might be a little questionable.
Well, yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of mistakes and a lot of penalties and all that good stuff. But the Cowboys got the win, so we'll take it.
There you go.
Well, excellent. So today we're going to start with strategy 1. I want to focus specifically on having a plan. And this is first because this really sets what I would call the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about in this series. And it should set the foundation for your investment strategy as well. Your portfolio or your investment strategy is not the plan. I wanted people to think about it this way. If your plan is really what's first going to establish your point A, where you're at today, and then your point B, where you want to go, that is your roadmap. Your portfolio, on the other hand, is simply the vehicle. It's the automobile, the airplane, whatever you want to use in your comparison that gets you from point A to point B. But without that plan, even the best vehicle is not going to have a good direction. So that's what we wanted to start with this episode.
Well, and I think that, I guess just speaking for myself, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I just thought you save this money, you save this money, you save this money. And then when you retire, you're like, you just kind of draw from the money. But no, we can still invest that. That's why we have the different buckets, so to speak. And I'm sure that you'll get to that at some point in this series.
Well, but it's a perfect example of why this is such an important topic. And again, it always starts with that financial plan. But I think it's also important before we talk about the plan is just stepping back and understanding the retirement environment that we are planning for today, because it looks so much different than it did for our parents and our grandparents. And when you combine that with this big, great wealth transfer that's in process, we know that women are going to be inheriting and managing more wealth than ever before. And here's something that I think many people overlook. I think it's right to your point. Investing in retirement is completely different than investing for retirement.
Right.
Because you think about the last 30, maybe even 40 years for some people, you've been in accumulation mode. You're working, you're saving, you're building that nest egg, or maybe you even received an inheritance, life insurance proceeds, a divorce settlement, whatever it might be. You suddenly find yourself in this new position. You need to turn the nest egg into a paycheck. And that's the big difference. And again, it really changes everything. And the concepts, the strategies, even the logic behind how you invest are completely different once you're retired. Because it's no longer just growing your assets. It's about creating a sustainable income, managing volatility, protecting against inflation. And ultimately, we just want to make sure that money lasts as long as you would need it, and hopefully longer.
Yeah.
I always like the idea is, I want to spend on the day I die, I want to spend the very last dollar. If we knew when that was going to be, it makes that equation a lot easier, but we don't.
Exactly. I'd rather have a little left over than not enough.
Yeah. Again, that's always people ask me, I want to spend every single bit of money that I have. So, okay, you tell me when the day your die is going to be, and I'll answer that question and take care of it.
Yeah.
But here's the other part to this is the 80s and 90s, you thought about, retirement looked a lot simpler back then. Many people had pensions. Such a high percentage of people had pensions. For the most part, markets were pretty strong. Healthcare was much more affordable. And Social Security felt much more secure. So I've talked about this in other episodes. 1983 was the last time we had this big revamp of the Social Security system.
Mm,
That's when they extended the retirement age out to 67, which it is today. So we very similar circumstances back then when we're saying, okay, yes, Social Security system's running dry. How are we going to fix this? That was this big part of the solution. And there was some other stuff that was worked in as well, but that was a big part of it. Is the Social Security system had been shored up, so to speak. Now we're facing the uncertainty of Social Security again. But even back then, we had high interest rates. Government bonds might be paying 8 or 9% back then. You could put your money in government bonds, get 8%, and still have enough left over to keep up with inflation. That's changed a lot as well because if you think about today, most people don't have pensions. They've pretty much gone away. Bond markets and interest rates have been extremely volatile these last few years. We've actually had four major bear markets just since 2000. Inflation has been crazy. If you look again, just a couple of years ago, we had the highest inflation rate we've seen in about 40 plus years. Healthcare costs, it worries everybody. But ultimately, again, retirement requires today it requires much more intention. You have to be much more intentional. It's just not something you can set on autopilot and let it go. That's not the way it's going to work.
right.
And then one of the other things we talked about back in episode 50, I introduced the great wealth transfer, or maybe I gave more of my perspective on this great wealth transfer. But it's gonna have such an impact on women over the next few years as well. You think about the literally trillions of dollars that women are going to be inheriting or generating themselves as business owners. But in many cases, it's gonna be the first time that they're managing this type of wealth on their own, whether that's because of loss of a spouse, an inheritance, or as we talked about in episode 72 with Renita Wolf, selling a business. That's one of the huge ways that women are going to be generating wealth over the next few years. But again, the challenge is most financial experience has been about saving during accumulation years, not managing wealth for income in retirement. And being the fact that you spend 2/3 of your life saving for retirement and only a third of your life in retirement. But it's that one third that just goes against everything you've learned up to that point.
Well, yeah, and there's such a fear because you're just like, "There's no more." Like, this and
Well, that's the thing. Everybody loves to turn work optional or financial independence, or I want to retire when I want to retire, or retirement is an optional thing. But really, it's not. Retirement is one of those things you either, and again, you could pass away, the unfortunate option one, but at some point, you're probably going to have to retire because if it's not option one, at some point, it may be you hope to be able to retire on your terms and live the life you want to live. But retirement could be forced by a health issue or losing a job. I mean, there's other circumstances, unfortunately, that lead to quote unquote retirement. And you got to be prepared when the time comes.
yeah.
So let's talk about how we actually start building this roadmap, this plan.
Okay.
So when you actually think about it, we actually want to start with something that's not financial at all. We want to begin with your values, right? Because again, retirement, if you really want to live the retirement that you choose, it goes beyond just the money. We want to think about what your purpose is, what gives meaning to your life. And it's the same principles that you really want to apply to your finances. And the way we start a lot of times is asking, there's a couple of different versions of this question you could use, but you want to ask yourself these questions. What is important about money to you? That's one way to ask it. What is important? Why? Because again, money is just the tool. It's the thing that allows you to that allows you to accomplish these other goals or do the things that you want to do. The other one I like to ask is why is money important to you?
Okay, so would they be different answers or the same answer?
It's just a little bit different way of framing it and how people think about it. Because you think of, well, what is important about money to you? And that might take a little bit of a mental hurdle to come up with an answer,
Okay.
but it can still work because you also start thinking about what really is important about money to you. Why do I want money? Why do I work? Why do I save? Why do I do all these things? So is it because it's the freedom that money can provide? Or it's because I want to spend time with family, or I want to do things for my family. I want to travel. Is it generosities? I want to be able to give money to others to help them to impact their lives. But that's where you start establishing the values that become the foundation of your financial plan.
Okay.
And those are two really good questions. And there's a lot of other questions out there. If I do a lot of research, I talk to other financial advisors about, what questions do you ask your clients? Because we can always continue to improve our conversation or the questions that we're asking prospective clients. But those are two that I found are really effective at just saying, why is money important to you?
Mhm.
because then that establishes our values. And then when we figure that part out, that becomes the beginning, almost the beginning of our point A. Because once you know what matters most, now we can start connecting those values to specific financial questions.
Okay, so for example, mine would be security. Like, I just don't want to worry, am I going to have enough money? And from that point on, that's how we start working the plan.
It could be, but it could be, well, why is security important to you? So it depends on there could be levels. And that's one of the things it's got to be. And as again, as a financial advisor, you sometimes struggle. You only look at that first answer, which might just be service level.
Okay.
So sometimes you got to make sure you're digging a little bit deeper to make sure you get to those, those probably the 3 to 5 really core values, which security might be it, not worrying about. So there's any number of things, but sometimes it goes deeper as to even to the point of breaking money silence. An episode, I can't even recall what episode it was, but sometimes it goes back to your childhood and what drives some of your decisions and understanding those things. Is again, when you get in a point where things get difficult, things get tough, whether it's because of market volatility or difficult financial circumstances, you're running low on money, whatever the case might be, the how you start making decisions around that could be driven by much more subconscious level thinking than what you might realize. So we did try to dig as deep as we can again to uncover what the true values are.
Okay. Something to think about.
Absolutely. So then again, once we know the values, now again, we start incorporating, leading that into the financial components of this. So like when we go through our Simply Retirement Roadmap process with a new prospective client, then we start talking about things again, the financial piece of this puzzle. How much are you going to need in retirement? Well, we don't want to just think about the monthly expenses, but also the lifestyle goals, the travel, the hobbies, the things that you actually want to do. We talk about, what is your strategy for Social Security? When do you think you want to claim? What are you eligible for? A lot of our clients that come to us or prospective clients that come to us have done so after losing a husband from divorce or being widowed. So making sure we understand what you're eligible for and then what are the potential claiming strategies that can help you maximize that lifetime income. Healthcare planning is such a big component as well, especially if you find yourself needing to or having to retire before the age of 65, before Medicare eligible. What is that going to look like? But then also long term care, extended healthcare planning. What is that going to look like? And ultimately, then we want to figure out what are your resources? How much do you have in investment in retirement assets?
Okay.
And again, always talk about the puzzle, the retirement income puzzle. You start putting these pieces of that puzzle together so you have a better picture or view of what your retirement's gonna look like.
Okay.
But they also think about your other goals. Again, for most part, people have more goals than just simply retirement. It could be, hey, I really want to have a meaningful impact on my grandchildren's education. I want to provide some of that, part of that, all of that, depending on what your financial resources are. Leaving a legacy. Do I want to leave a legacy for my family? Do I want to leave a legacy through charitable donations when I'm no longer here? So those types of things become important as well. But as again, when you work through these questions, we start with your values, we look at your resources, your financial resources. Now that roadmap starts to become much clearer. So we start identifying, now we know where you're at today. We know your values, we know your goals, we know your resources, we know your worries. You said that one, that worries very frequently in that conversation about what's important is but it also, what is it that worries you? That's always, again, when we talk about digging deeper, that's an important one. But then we talked about, again, we're talking about a roadmap. We know where you're at today. Now we got to figure out where you're going. So when do you want to retire? What do you want retirement to look like? And what are the other goals that you want to accomplish? Then step 3, now we get to the portfolio, the investments, right? Again, the investments are not the plan. It's the vehicle that takes you from point A to point B. Without that roadmap, again, the investments are just an engine with no direction. There's
Right.
nothing there because you find out that a lot of people, that's where a lot of the worry comes from because they're just thinking about the portfolio. They're just looking at that statement and they're seeing values going up and down over time. And if you're just focused on that, that becomes where a lot of that worry really starts eating away. And you say, well, hey, just thinking about this and not thinking about, okay, well, I have a plan. We prepared for this. We know how we're going to deal with this. And that's really what's going to be over these next few episodes. We're going to start peeling back the pieces of this process for, again, understanding investing in retirement, how we deal with some of these challenges that are on people's minds about market volatility, about inflation, about growing my income. So those are all going to be pieces of this conversation that we have over the next few episodes.
Okay.
So again, it starts by just building a roadmap that connects your values, your vision, and your resources, aligning your investments as the vehicle to help you live the retirement that you want.
Okay.
So, just a quick recap of what we talked about in today's episode and what we're kicking off over the next few episodes. We launched our series, Seven Essential Strategies for Successful Investing in Retirement. We looked at how retirement has changed from where you previously had these stable pensions, high bond yields, to in the past, where now today we've got a much more complex environment. We've revisited that great wealth transfer conversation where we know that trillions of dollars are going to be shifting to women, many managing assets or managing wealth solo for the first time. And we focused on strategy number one, which is having a plan. And again, we're starting here because it is the most important of all seven strategies. It becomes the framework, it's the roadmap. Everything else builds on top of that. Because without a clear plan, the rest of the strategies really don't have a direction.
All right.
So, in the coming episodes, we're going to cover the remaining strategies, combining them into three focused conversations. In the next episode, we're going to talk about strategies two and three, understanding the true objective of a retirement portfolio. And also, what I think could be the most important beyond just having a plan, and that's how to reframe risk in retirement. I think that's a really big challenge that many people have is how I think about risk when we're talking about market risk or inflation risk. How can we define risk in a way that gives you a level of comfort as you're going through those retirement years? The episode after that is we're going to cover strategies four and five, the role of stocks, and why, for the most part, most people need stocks as part of their retirement portfolio. We're also going to talk about the value of dividend growth. That's going to be a big component of that as well. And then we're going to wrap it up in the fourth episode with strategy six and seven, the role that taxes play in retirement, but more importantly, managing taxes. And lastly, I want to help answer the question, should I work with a financial advisor?
Okay.
And again, each of these strategies builds on the foundation we've set today. And they, again, together, they provide a roadmap for living your retirement years with clarity and confidence. So again, hopefully everybody will stay tuned. There's a lot of valuable ground that we're going to cover. So if you're looking for a personalized retirement plan that helps you make smart decisions around income, investments, and taxes, feel free to visit getmysimplyretirementroadmap.com to schedule a phone call with our team. That is it for today's episode. As a reminder, for all the links and resources mentioned, you can visit the simplyretirementpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, follow, and share the show. And until next time, please remember, retirement is not the end of the road. It's the start of a new journey.
That's it for today's episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast. We hope you found our insights and advice helpful in planning for a fulfilling retirement. Don't forget to take action on what you've learned today. Visit our website at blakewealthmanagement.com to learn more about our firm and review our Simply Retirement Roadmap process to get you on the right path to the retirement you deserve. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to helping you achieve your retirement goals. Remember, retirement is not the end of the road, it is the start of a new journey. So embrace it and make the most of it. Until next time, take care. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Blake Wealth Management. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Blake Wealth Management or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor, Blake Wealth Management, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.